I love this. We had Alexa in the background just a minute ago come up, so this is perfect timing. Dr. Anthony Blash, welcome. Thank you for joining us at the Pharmacy Informatics Academy live stream. Really appreciate your time and your commitment to the profession of pharmacy, but also to the future of where we're going in healthcare and in technology. So, just kind of as a start, I just want to introduce you to the audience as and I want to say in sort of the best way possible, but you are the OG of pharmacy informatics to me. We were actually just talking right before this, like how you actually went through the first pharmacy informatics residency. You've kind of really blazed a path in pharmacy informatics from a very executive level, working with large IDNs, I would say, or academic, at least large health systems, to optimize, implement, and kind of monitor these EHR technologies. And you've kind of gone about it in such a smart way that now you're sharing it with others, our students, our learners, and next generation pharmacists. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today. And we're gonna get into a lot of different things, but I just wanted to welcome you and just say thank you for coming to join us. If you wouldn't mind, just
thank you.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick snapshot of kind of what your role is today and what you're up to today as it stands, and then we can kind of work our way backwards and kind of look at it from how it all began. So
Okay, yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. This is a wonderful way to close out 2022.
that's right.
This has been an incredible year, on the pluses and minuses, but we are just
Yep.
we are just cresting on a high note these days, and I don't know if we're going to get into all this artificial intelligence stuff that's bubbling in the background, but oh my gosh, what a period of time we're living in. I
It
am
really is.
currently, it is, oh my goodness. I'm currently an associate professor at the College of Pharmacy at Belmont University, and Belmont's in Nashville, Tennessee. So Nashville, Tennessee is a hotbed for healthcare informatics, and that just happens to be our subspecialty. So I am really blooming where I've been planted since 2013. I have I'm responsible for the informatics concentration in the College of Pharmacy. So what that means is, at Belmont, you have an opportunity to, go through the standard curriculum, and then like a minor, we have five concentration paths, right? So there's management, there's pharmacotherapy, so straight up the middle. There's missions because we're a faith-based institution, so we have a lot of mission work and outreach. So we have missions, and then we have a collaborative track where you would interact with the College of Nursing. We have a College of Nursing here. We're about to have a College of Medicine very soon opening up, either next year or the year after. So that concentration coordinates projects with those groups. And then we have informatics. So since 2013, I've been responsible for the informatics concentration here at Belmont. And uh, we have focused on, very selfishly from my perspective, we have focused on creating and training the type of healthcare informaticists that I would have loved to have had when I was in corporate. Um, and
Right.
any preceptor can tell you, anyone who's dealt with the students coming out of the academy can tell you that sometimes there's a gap between what the marketplace needs and what the
Mhm.
student is able to provide. So I have, been blessed with the opportunity to create that type of student that would have, served the team well in a corporate setting or in an informatics setting, hospital
Right.
setting, setting, whatever. So,
Right.
so that's where I am now, and we have had tremendous success uh, finding students who are interested in this pathway and helping them with both the didactic or lecture-based and the project-based work that should go into an informatics conversation at the academic level. so that when they leave and go to, their rotations, they're ready to contribute to the team, which is
Right.
exciting, super exciting.
I mean, that is one thing I hear time and time again. So I'm in health tech. I work largely with startups, but I work with, customers who have large informatics teams as well and IT teams, and these are large health systems as well. So it's interesting that you say that was a need that you were trying to fill then, and now it's sort of the same story. It's like, if we can shore that gap up, with our pharmacy students, you know, there's demand. There's certainly demand out there for folks who are, you know, really good at analyzing data, to folks who are really good at building products, and also in sales and marketing. There's a bunch of other, roles there. But it's commendable that you're actually doing it in a smart way. Building this system, where it's sort of, we're just talking about like how, we treaded the same path before pharmacy school. And I appreciate the fact that it's not just a track, it's a minor. You mentioned the minor, having a minor in a certain, it's almost like moving away from competency to proficiency in some
Right.
sense, right? And so, I remember back in the day, I was, even before I get to pharmacy, and I think you probably speak to this as well, is, I actually decided to start my first path coming to the US, starting my first path in computer science, because I kind of knew this was the way forward, the next decade or two. Didn't imagine this. Certainly didn't
Right.
imagine, like, this is way far surpassed what I even imagined. But I was able to take on. So I started with computer science, but I was able to then sort of transition to MIS, and then still have a comp sci minor. And I think that was really important because it allowed me to have still the fundamentals
Yep.
of a certain aspect where that tool came in so much use time after time after that. Um, but it was also very reflective in terms of demonstrating on your portfolio to future employers and potential employers. So it's such a smart way that you've kind of established that concept of having a PharmD, but not just a PharmD, but also a minor in you know informatics, for example, or in
Yep.
other minors. So could you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, I'm just because I'm a little bit interested now. Like,
Sure.
is that sort of a credential that is applicable to the student, and then how does that translate to the learner? Being able to apply that to potential recruiters coming out of school, or how does that apply to them, joining the workforce, or
Yeah. Excellent questions. Excellent questions. I think that to the first question, I guess we should start with our North Star. So for
mm,
me, in corporate and in academia, I've always been affiliated with organizations that advocate for healthcare informatics, organizations that support this type of conversation. And
yeah,
our North Star currently is affiliated with HIMSS, so Health
mm,
Information Management Systems Society. And I hold the certifications for HIMSS, so I'm CA HIMSS certified and CP HIMSS certified. And the students, we are at Belmont University College of Pharmacy. We're one of the uh, few approved education partners with HIMSS, right? So we were the first pharmacy school to get that credential. So that means that we can teach along the lines that align with that certification, the entry level CAM certification. So the first class that students are exposed to in the informatics conversation is a required course. It's a dual team taught course. It's drug information and informatics. And informatics takes the second half of that semester. Drug information takes the first half. We have a real superstar in the drug information space. Half of my residency um, out of Creighton in informatics was drug information as well. So I can understand and respect the fact that they are so closely tied, but they're
yeah.
super different topics. And a lot of professionals get those two confused sometimes.
That
Uh,
that is definitely something we need to demystify, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
at the same time, you're right. They're very closely aligned, and in fact, that's something that was born that that was something that was a strength at my institution as well. Having a close relationship with medication use in
Yes,
general is those two components. So yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And in the hospital space, information is king. I mean, if we have to justify our existence, if we have
yeah,
to generate trend reporting or find patterns in the data,
yeah,
it's critical to have someone who understands that part, right? So,
yeah.
so the first course is that required course, and all the students in the cohort have to go through that course. And then after that, so that's P1 year. And then second semester P2 year, students get to branch off into these concentrations. So they've had an exposure to mission work. Everybody knows what mission work is. Everybody knows what management is. By that time, you understand what pharmacotherapy is. You understand collaborative practice. But if we didn't have that first exposure in that P1 year for informatics,
Yeah.
it'd just be like a gray screen to people. They wouldn't understand what we were talking about because it's so multifaceted, right?
Oh, interesting. So you're working on awareness on the first year. That's really smart. Yeah.
Yeah. The students have to choose which pathway they're going to take. And they can also go undecided, right? So you can choose no
Yeah.
concentration if you like. But if you choose informatics, and we call it healthcare informatics specifically and not
Mm,
pharmacy informatics because there's been too much siloing in our worlds, and
yeah.
healthcare informatics just opens us up to a lot more conversations, right? So
Mm.
you and I are healthcare informaticians with a pharmacy expertise. That's how I like to think of us, right?
Okay. All right.
So,
Sign me
so
up. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So we can touch projects that it would be inappropriate for any other healthcare professional or IT
Yeah.
professional or healthcare informatics professional to touch, right?
Mm,
So as marketplaces get to know that, they respect that role. But anyway,
mm,
if you choose the informatics concentration, then you have 5 additional conversations you can have in that informatics track. So you can have one in the second semester of the P2 year, two in the semesters in P3, and then uh, actually two, three in the P3 year. So that's step
mm.
one, step two, step three, step four. And then if my student comes on, Mr. Lakeview, he's in the APPE. So he's in the rotation phase. So that would be
Okay.
5. So there's an opportunity for 5 um, deep level conversations in this informatics. You can count the drug information in informatics, but that's just a light dusting. But
Right.
again, those students in the P1 year, our tradition these days is that they come out as competent uh, SQL analysts. So at that point, they're head and
Hmm.
shoulders above most other graduating pharmacy students, because they have
Right.
exposure to SQL, they understand how to use large data sets,
Yeah.
report that out. They don't get the visualization because there's not enough time, but still, you're head and
Yeah.
shoulders above the traditional pharmacy graduate at that point.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's like an absolute competency that at least that's what I had asked my learners to start with is like SQL is a basic competency as much as English is or mathematics is today, in our
Absolutely.
world. So I'm so glad that you mentioned it. And I'm just gonna pull up the hymns. So we talked about the hymns approved education partner, and you were the first, or Belmont was the first as part of that. And so if folks want to go, and learn more a little bit about what that means, they can go to the HIMSS website here, and I really like the fact that you were at the cutting edge and you acknowledge the partnerships as well. HIMSS is a great organization that I've also been part of. Beyond our traditional pharmacy organizations, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
HIMSS does kind of take it another level, and create that sort of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary kind of type of collaboration that we talk about.
Right.
And I think, Dr. Blash, you mentioned volunteerism is a really kind of good way to get started, or folks, for learners and new practitioners alike, to kind of get involved in, volunteering at HIMSS, right? Is probably a good way to go about it. Are there any other sort of opportunities that you can think of today that would be good ways to get started and get involved in the community, informatics community in general?
Well, it depends. Are you talking about for the pharmacy professional or for the pharmacy student? Because there's two different pathways associated with that.
Yeah. Also, let's say start with the student first. Yeah, that's kind of a
Okay.
good point.
Yeah. So with the students, you know, let's assume you're not at Belmont, right, as a student, and you want to get involved. So before coming to Belmont, I taught at Drake in Des Moines,
Hmm.
right? So Drake
Hmm.
University College of Pharmacy or School of Pharmacy, and another great environment, another one that was very supportive of the informatics conversation. Uh, but when I transitioned away from there, the conversation sort of slowed, right? So let's say you're a student at one of the other 143 colleges of pharmacy. And there are some colleges of pharmacy that are doing great things in this informatics space, so don't get me wrong. But I think the volunteering opportunities in ASHP, they have a strong informatics conversation. I think
Yeah.
NCPDP is always asking for student volunteers. We always get
Hmm.
requests, and we have some very good friends in that space. Uh, APHA, one of the one of the faculty members that I used to teach with at Drake. I don't know if he's still president there, but is the recent past president.
Hmm.
Um, and he has he has an organization that is also very interested in this informatics conversation. I mean, really, Bijou, who can who's not interested in this conversation at this point? I mean, you've got to be facing 180 degrees in the
100%.
opposite direction, not to be interested in this conversation. So the sky's the limit. I mean, any
Yeah.
organization that you find yourself affiliated with is going to want to have that conversation. So as a student, I mean, you could really, like you said, it's just a land of opportunity here. I always tell my students, this informatics conversation right now is picture a fresh snowstorm. You open your back door, and all you see is untouched snow, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can build a snowman, a
Right.
fort, whatever you want, and that's literally what we're looking at these days. Like
Yeah.
you could go outside your front door today, throw your hand up, whistle twice, and jobs would be like appearing like magic in front of your face. There's just so much opportunity and so
That's right.
little resource that's available to take advantage of that. You know, it's mind-boggling. It really is.
That's
But
right. Yeah.
but you have to have a certain mindset to want to do this.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I
and
was.
go ahead.
Yeah. No, no. I was just thinking about your statement of like you can just kind of get outside, get out the door, essentially, um, or outside your office or your lab, whatever. Like, and actually touch something and like create something from scratch and then kind of take it wherever, like take it to market, get a job, whatever that opportunity is. And so one thing I will say like is there's there I think what is missing is the skills gap, that I
Yep.
think you've kind of touched on, which is amazing that there are colleges that are actually looking at this very pragmatically, like yours, and saying like, how can we kind of build a system that creates success for the learner or the individual? And then there's also the experience gap, right? And so like, then how do we take that forward? How we learn these concepts? How I call it the build, measure, learn, right? This kind of going back to the startup mindset, I guess. But
Sure.
we can build, measure, learn things in the sort of academic perspective, but then also we can apply those concepts and we can iterate around those concepts in the industry. And so whether that means, hey, you could, work on building, and I saw like, even a couple of years ago, you started, building into your curriculum Alexa programming skills. So you can literally build like, Alexa skills. I think there is a few that I came across, the drug Quizlet type of app, or
Yeah.
diabetes kind of
Yep.
gamification kind of Alexa skill, and it really drew me back. I was like, you can just get started. Sure, it takes a bit of effort, to get started, but once you get started and you can learn how to do it, you can create something that hasn't existed before. You can take it to market, and then you can see where the value is, and super interesting. Um, have a friend of mine who's also a pharmacist colleague, Mike Crovino of Core Consult RX,
Mm.
and I think he was the very first. He came from the community setting. I always think of him as a Joe Rogan of pharmacy because he was a former MMA fighter and
Wow.
sort of now pharmacist. Super humble guy and great guy overall. But he started the first Alexa skill in the pharmacy, and this was when it was probably very clunky to actually do.
Yeah.
Um, and he's got a Medium article out there since like 2016 or 17. I can't remember what day, but and I was just thinking to myself, any of this is possible. Not just students, not just new practitioners, really anyone. Like even if you're a mid-career professional right now, like working, whether it's a retail setting, it's industry, managed care, whatever, you can get in and you can start learning ton of different things like Python, R, SQL, any of these
Oh my
things that
gosh.
we can think about, right? And you can start applying them to create things, whether it's a hobby or not, right? It doesn't
Absolutely.
matter. Like you can execute. And I think that's when you talk about opportunity, that's what I think about opportunities. Like you can get started and you can actually do something that could be valuable to someone else,
Yeah.
regardless if it's monetized or not, right? Like,
Because
so
you know what your pharmacy space needs. You know what I'm saying? You know what it needs. So if you're having
that's
to
a good
hand
point.
calculate
Yeah,
dosings,
yeah,
you and I could twist something up to do that automatically in less than half an hour, right? So
right.
there's opportunities that okay. I tell my students that pharmacy is a deep body of knowledge, right?
Hmm.
And computer science or whatever you want to call informatics, healthcare IT is a deep body of knowledge, but both of them are very narrow and they don't touch, right? So if you have feet in both of those ponds, you're a rare, you're breathing rare air, and you can see connections that the traditional clinical pharmacist just can't see, just can't see. I mean, because there's no awareness of what you're looking at. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's no awareness of the opportunity that's right in front of you.
yeah.
So
Can you
you bring
automate a
that value.
process? Can you
Exactly.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's yeah, yeah.
And when you
So,
bring that value to the team, they're like
mhm,
flabbergasted. Oh yeah, let's do this, let's do that. Or they already know something that they want to do, but the learning curve for the traditional clinical pharmacist is so high that it's just not feasible.
yeah, yeah. That's a really good point. And you know, I always say like there's ways like going back to the point of like how you kind of break in or how do you volunteer as
Hmm.
not just a student but also now like thinking about it as a practitioner. Um, maybe that's there's a pathway where if you're in a clinical role or if you're in sort of a setting that doesn't allow you to kind of cross both domains, um, then maybe partnering with the informatics professional or the
Right.
health IT consultant or whatever, as a subject matter expert could be another middle way, I guess. What other kind of ways can folks, who are in practice, not necessarily in technology, but in just clinical practice or
Yeah.
operations, what are ways that they can kind of, really volunteer or get started or get
Hmm.
more
Hmm.
acclimated with this, with technology in general?
Yeah. When I went for training, so I went to a review course for the CAHIM certification, which is the entry level healthcare
Mm,
informatics certification for HIMSS. And I'm
right.
sitting in a classroom at the HIMSS conference, and there's 30 clinical or informatics or HIT professionals in the room. And in my class, in my cohort, there were at least six from community, and it was a large chain, right? So I'm not
No
going to name the
kidding.
chain, but yeah. So they were sitting in a group. The large chain had sponsored them being there for the informatics conversation, and that's so rare to me.
Mm,
I never expected to see that. I cut my teeth in informatics coming out of residency. I went straight to Grady Health System in Atlanta.
yeah.
So, but those of you who don't know, Grady Health System is like a 1,000-bed hospital in the heart of Atlanta, serves the underserved community, DeKalb DeKalb, and Fulton County, right?
Mm.
So, and they're just on the cutting edge of conversation. It's a teaching institution, and I'm always drawn to those types of institutions because they chase the knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
they have a very active conversation in informatics, and pharmacy is involved in that conversation. And I, so from there to Atlanta Medical Center and other hospitals in Atlanta, I have seen many times the traditional clinical pharmacist jump into a project that the hospital's doing. They don't know it for jack, but they're coming in as a clinical pharmacist because a clinical pharmacist is kind of needed on the team,
Mm.
and they just, you know, roll their way through the conversation, and eventually, at the end of the project, somebody's like, "Well, can you stay on for another project and another project?" So there are
That's right.
opportunities that pop up like that. So that's
Yeah.
volunteering might be right next to you, where you're sitting right now,
That's
for
right.
the professional in the space. But again, the ASHP, APHA, all of our organizations, NCPDP, all of our organizations have this conversation occurring now, and they need people. They need people. Like you said earlier, the space
Absolutely.
is so wide open and there's so few resources. You can basically walk through the door. Now, I will tell you, the credentials help a lot if you're coming in without a lot of experience in your back pocket.
Mm.
Getting that base level credential tells the world, okay, well, I understand the conceptual conversation that we're trying to have, and I'm ready to go further with your team or with our team to help make that better. Um, I
Yeah.
say it once, I say it 1,000 times. If you have an clinical informatics related project going on in the hospital, and you don't have a pharmacy informaticist in that space, then it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible because no one can see what we can see. Like, I can't see what a cardiologist can see necessarily. I can't see what the emergency medicine doc can see because I don't live in that space. So there's a lot of opportunities for volunteerism, and they may be closer than the audience is thinking.
Yeah. No, I like all of those points. And actually, it's funny because I think this was like probably a decade ago, but I remember you know, hanging around a lot of the ASHP circuit,
Yes,
functioning. So like we had a lot of socials, a lot of networking sessions, but also a lot of educational sessions at Major. And actually, I remember meeting a lot of the same folks at these events, and it was a great opportunity to learn from our peers and from like what's going on at different institutions, but also to stay up to speed with different topics that are going on in industry. And so back then it was kind of like Fight Club. It was like you really talk about it. You didn't really besides the folks that who knew really what informatics was, there was no one else that kind of really joined these sessions. I think that's changed, right? Over time, it's
yes,
changed, and you have a lot more new folks coming in and interested. Awareness is a bit higher, and so you're seeing a bit more diversity, which is great. I would love to see it, explode,
yeah,
and really get a lot more students in, for sure. But I think that's a really great point because there is a community out there. There are many communities, in fact, now out
many.
there, and you can learn a ton. But you can also maybe that will take you to other opportunities where you can work, collaborate with some of these folks, whether it's a bit with an organization or it's outside of an organization in many different ways. And so, yeah, that's really good. And Blair actually just joined the conversation, making a really great point here as well. I'm gonna just throw the comment in here, but yeah, Blair says healthcare informatics over pharmacy informatics for sure. That's a great point. I think I'm gonna go with that. I think that's gonna open up a lot more eyes from the student level. And then also she said you need to understand many of the many clinical modules in EHR building. So as we have these integrated large EHRs now, like there's a few that we can probably name, but it's important to know what the modules are Yes, definitely, Blair. In fact, there's a lot of non-pharmacy modules that pharmacists can get involved in as well. And so, you
Absolutely.
know, it should not be just, pharmacy informatics is one component. We're really spread across the whole spectrum with that. So I really like your points. Anything else, Dr. Blash?
Yeah. So excitingly, we're doing a second cycle of a project that we worked on maybe 7 years ago. So the team 7 years ago, we got access to a smart pump because we have a simulation center, and we
Ooh,
built the guardrails.
okay.
So we have a project going on now where we're actually creating an IV titration matrix for the units,
Oh
right?
my
So all the
gosh.
meds that you would use in the units,
Right.
we're putting together with our clinical eye
Mm-hmm.
the initial dose, the step up, the bolus, the maintenance, how long the maintenance is, the wean,
Yeah.
the stop, and any other parameters that go into that, right? So there are many institutions in the world that cannot afford our expertise, right? So there's a
Ooh.
23-bed hospital in Washington,
Yeah.
Walla Walla, Washington, that can't afford a healthcare informaticist with pharmacy expertise. It's just not in their budget, right?
Yeah.
So our team, the student team, creates this IV titration matrix. I, as a licensed pharmacist, check the IV titration matrix for clinical relevance and accuracy, and then
Mm-hmm.
we just give it away. We just give it
I
away.
love that.
You
So
know?
open source drug
Yes,
information right there.
yes.
That is phenomenal. I can't tell you how many times I've, come across folks who were they either had a really great drug information center and they were largely responsible for creating those libraries, and then the informatics team kind of responsible for operationalizing them. And then there are some institutions I've come across that, yeah, like you said, the resources weren't there at all, and you're kind of like you're almost like at the running wild here, like with just I guess for full context for the audience, a lot of these systems that are put in place, smart pumps are definitely one that's more nurse side or bedside point of care, but they do rely on these drug libraries to make sure that the patient is given safe and effective medicine at the point of care. And off the shelf, I would say a lot of them are very, very generic. The
Right.
templates are very broad. Um, they're not at all probably safe if you're taking it out of the box and using your own patients, right? Um, Beyond the clinical judgment of the nurse or whoever
Yeah,
the provider
yeah.
at the
And
point
that's
of
the
care is, right?
recommendation from the vendor also because they don't want to be liable. So most times they'll just
Yes.
give it to you blank
Yeah.
and you have to build what you want to build. And sometimes they'll give you a module, but they'll make
Right.
you acknowledge the disclaimer that hey,
Right.
we're just giving it to you now. You have to do what you want with this and make it your
Yeah.
own. So with our giving of that resource, we always say check with your med exec committee, check with your physician provider committee, your
Right.
informatics committee, and make sure
Right.
you approve each one of these parameters before you put this into place because it's yours. And from hospital to hospital, there are slightly different tweaks to how you manage a
Mm,
patient with the same medication. So, the guidelines are just that, they're guidelines. But you have to make that thing your own. And there are going to be changes that probably need to be made. But we'll
yeah.
get you, your foot in the door. And that's the way we do it. Most of our projects usually. So we have the market need projects. We work on the large data sets. We're working on a brand new data set with the Belmont Data Collaborative. They've created a data set of hypertension in the Nashville community by zip code. So my students, from
Uh,
the P1 student all the way to the P4 or P3, P4 students, they're going to go into that data set and
mm,
they're going to look for patterns and they're going to look for things and they're going to make hypotheses and maybe we'll find some knowledge gap that we can publish. But the core of that is massaging a true data set. And it's not a true data set in the fact that it's pristine. It's already pristine, right? So it's not an ugly, dirty data set like we're used to.
Mm.
So they're not going to
Yeah.
have those issues, but that's good for a teaching. That's good for a teaching environment, you know?
Yeah. That's phenomenal. I love the fact that you're building the next generation of pharmacists that can learn a lot of these concepts, but also apply them. And you spoke a little bit about or touched upon like the fact that you're now seeing value from the industry and you're building bridges here with
Oh
industry.
yeah.
So are you seeing a lot of traction with uh, learners kind of either joining the industry or are you seeing a lot of traction with industry kind of coming to Belmont University and saying, hey, we want to start a program or develop a product or or maybe it's both. And so kind of like maybe you could give us a sense of like what's going on from the ground level and share a little bit more about the sort of innovation hub you've created there.
Yeah. So the opportunities that we have are frequent. So normally, once the students finish a product or finish a project, we'll put out a press release. And at the end of every press release, we're like, hey, if you want to partner with us and uh, have a competent uh, budding pharmacy informaticist on your team that can bring value to your team, just get in contact with us. We'd be happy to talk to you about opportunities. And we've had organizations come to us at the tail end of the academic career where they're looking for team members to join their
Mm,
team. We've had organizations come to us who have informatics residencies or fellowships, and they want to seed those with competent residents or fellows so they can
mm,
advance their objectives. We've had organizations and I think this is one of the smartest ways to do it if you have access to that. We've had organizations approach us like almost exclusively for internship opportunities for like the P1, P2 students who have a free
very
summer.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, our
Yeah.
students are eating internships like you wouldn't
Yeah.
believe at this
This
point.
is, by the way, Dr. Blash, this is the page on your PR on the Alexa certified
Yes,
skill developer. So so kind of like to your point, like getting early start, whether it's just on the didactic side of things with P1s, P2s, or getting experiential like training like as interns. That's amazing. But just seeing this, like getting a visual snapshot of like what is going, and this is like, again, this is like a year ago, so you've been doing a ton of different things, not just Alexa. um, but it just makes me think like how can other colleges also kind of continue this progress, because I think that's part of it, right? Like it, it's all of us. It's we spoke earlier about, before we got on this, we were talking about like how do we like prevent the students, learners from falling through the cracks and like simply kind of going through the traditional pathway. But
yeah,
there's all these other opportunities. Like how do we capture, and we still, I don't think there's a solution to it. Like it's still, we're still seeing like at my organization, I think there's a handful of students every year that were interested, I say like very lightly, like interested in
right,
informatics,
right.
let alone healthcare tech, right? And so, you know, it just makes me think what you've kind of built as a model could be very likely, translated to other colleges, or at least like could be borrowed by other colleges, and could have a really big impact to the journey of the pharmacy student. I always think back, when and this is like way back 2010 when I graduated, right? Even before that, you know, I didn't, we were talking about, I didn't have really any resources at the time to
Yep,
learn about any of this stuff. The
yep,
platforms didn't even exist at the time.
right,
Mentors were like very localized, and even in that sense, they were very far and few between, um, and not necessarily even in the field, right? And
yep,
so you kind of think about there's so many different ways to reach the students where they are. How do we kind of build it so we can reach as many, capture as many in the sort of net as possible, to then kind of inspire them to take that next step forward. What would you kind of advise other colleges, do in terms
Oh my
of,
gosh.
I mean, I know there's probably like a
Yeah.
hundred things, right? But like out
Well,
of everything,
yeah.
like,
I think there is a catch 22 in your question.
hmm,
So
okay,
the curriculum committees that create and approve the curriculum are 99.9% clinical or
hmm,
scientists, right?
yeah,
So there's pharmacy science or pharmacy practice. So if there's
hmm,
no informatics champion on the faculty already, who's going to bring up the conversation? And then if someone does bring up the conversation,
that's a good
who's
point.
going to teach the course? Who's going to teach the course, right?
Right.
It's as foreign to a clinical pharmacist as it's foreign to a clinical pharmacist, right? And the
Yeah.
faculty members make up that pathway. So Belmont College of Pharmacy was founded in 2009, right? And we're in a hotbed of IT. So we went out to our community stakeholders and asked, what
Hmm.
would you like to see in a graduating pharmacist? And we have the largest healthcare organization in the world about a mile away from us.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And they had input into that question. And what they wanted to see was the concentrations, some of the concentrations that we have today, including the informatics concentration. So from the onset, we were on that trajectory. It's very
That's
hard to move a large glacier to a different trajectory once you've been in place 50, 75, 85,
right.
100 years, unless it's being required by the accrediting bodies.
That's
And right
right.
now,
Yeah.
there are loose requirements in place, but I don't think it's the type that would, require that significant movement that you're referring to.
And I'm glad you call it out. So, 2009 was a really important timestamp. Just for reference, I'm looking at um, the HIMSS Partners in E program, and this was like something that was established way before, right? But
Yeah,
in 2007, the impetus was the ACP standards that sort of mandated kind of a non-prescriptive guideline, I guess, or competency around informatics. Uh, and so, it was a rough measure, right? But because you already started in 2009, after the sort of ACP, standards were published, and you had the industry backing, I suppose, like that's important to recognize because there's a lot of programs out there that are trying to figure it out after the
right,
fact, and it's
right.
like
It's
it's hard.
tough. It's
It's
really
tough.
tough.
And
I
then
mean,
to
if
your
you have
point,
the will, then you need the personnel.
right, right, and that's the other thing. A lot of folks, a lot of colleges don't have those resources, like to be an informatics trained professional and to teach at an
Right,
institution. How many of those are they out there that fit the need for each college? So again, the Partners in E program I think was a great kind of start. I think, at some point we covered this. I think Dr. Eric Umack and Julie Paula had and I had sort of covered the e-course kind of e-learning platforms at the time out there. I think Partners in E was one of them that was quite significant.
yeah,
But ultimately, I don't think it it um, it was sustainable because I think what occurred was, the need for information to be updated, it has grown rapidly since,
oh
right?
my
And
gosh. Oh,
so like how do you sustain like knowledge and how do you keep that current in terms of content? Um,
I'm
so I
running
think,
so fast, you would not believe. I
yeah,
re-record my lectures like every 9 to 12 months, every 15 months.
no
And
kidding.
the students, bless them, they're wonderful. It's
Right,
a collaborative event between myself and my teams.
right.
Um, they bring to me. So you've been to the HIMSS conference before, PG? Have you been there before?
Twice,
Okay.
yeah,
You know how large those are, right?
yeah,
And you know how many talks there are.
I'm not gonna lie, the swag is phenomenal. So
Phenomenal. Phenomenal. It is. and and my thing is when I first started going to those HIMSS conferences, I used to like literally run
right,
from one end of the football stadium, the 10 football stadiums to the other, trying to get to
that's
these
right.
talks, right?
Right.
Now I bring the catalog back to Belmont
Mm.
and I give the title only to the students. And I say, hey, put a presentation together on this.
Oh my
So
gosh.
in each step of the course,
Yeah.
we're having contemporary cutting edge conversation. The
Amazing.
student is the expert in the room. I haven't
Hmm.
gone to the talk because I'm not jogging 5 miles every time I want to go to a talk. So I haven't
That's
gone to
right.
the talk, but I can communicate with them because I understand the concepts behind the talk, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I'm learning from the students. The students' team is learning from this. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And
And they probably don't realize what they're getting out of it at the time, but when they're sitting across from their opportunity and one of those subjects come up, because I curate the titles now, I'm giving them what the
right.
marketplace is looking for.
Right.
So when they're sitting across from their opportunity, they can talk intelligently about it. It's staggering. It's staggering.
That is, that is just, I think, foreshadowing what is to come, because I'm so glad you've taken that turning point, and now like the next inflection point, it's going to be so much more, there's going to be so much more information and so much knowledge to kind of apply. Like, again, going back to opportunities, there's going to be a lot more opportunities within that too. So I'm just thinking, like, even the recent turn of events with OpenAI, for example, Chat GPT, you've seen all the kind of discussions
Game
going
changer.
around, right?
Game
It's
changer.
insane. And so, like, even with sort of learning, I think that's going to be a great tool to some extent. But then how do students apply it? So it's like, maybe this is a great use case where you're looking at, let's go to HIMSS, or let's go to any
Yeah.
sort of health, whatever other conference, AMIA, right? Any of these conferences, and let's come back with those topics, and then let's use like OpenAI or some sort of other
Yeah.
tool or contract to create a presentation, and then let's have a topic discussion around that or something to that effect. So then we're sort of like, again, going back to cutting edge, like you said, cutting edge topics. We're not staying stagnant with information. We're
Yeah.
also we know the fundamentals, but we also know what is current. So those two things should juxtapose each other, right? And now you're valuable. Like, you are truly valuable as an individual, but also as an organization, because you're doing things that are going back to, like, why did we sign up for this?
Yeah.
Science, right? The
Yeah.
scientific knowledge, the body of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what we sign up for. So now we're really on that cusp of becoming better at science, being better scientists, right?
And it's
In
beautiful.
tech. It's
It's beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah.
Contributing to the learning health system just gives you chills. Our
Yes.
students, I'm like, traditional clinical pharmacists have that one-on-one patient interaction. We interact with thousands of patients at one time.
Amazing.
The changes we make to a hospital system are changing the lives of everyone who touches that part of the conversation.
That's
And I
right.
tell my students, and I could tell you, and I could tell your audience right now, based on the clinical decision support that I've helped implement across the country, I know I just saved a patient from the start of
Yeah.
that sentence to the end of that sentence. I know I just
Yeah.
saved a patient. So I try to impress upon them the weight of what we can accomplish. And the
Yes.
opposite side of that is the damage you can impose if you're not where you need to be in terms of thoroughness and accuracy, because we change systems, we change
That's right.
environments. We don't we don't change one patient at a time. We change hundreds, thousands. So it's a weighty opportunity, but who else is positioned to do that besides you, myself, the audience that we interact with, our community, and these students in the classroom? Who's going to do it? We're the only ones that can carry that torch.
I mean, I was thinking of Spider-Man, but he doesn't exist. So yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
was thinking of the statement, with great power comes great responsibility, but
There it
you
is.
really,
There it is.
it's true though. It's really true. So I really enjoyed this conversation, Dr. Flash, and I wanted to ask you one last thing, which was, you know, we're we're at the end of 2022 and we're heading over to 2023. So there's a lot to look forward to, right? Like
Wow.
we've already said it, there's been a lot of excitement this year. What are you kind of looking forward to next year in terms of professional development or any sort of learning or innovation, or like what kind of things are you kind of looking forward to,
Oh my
and why?
gosh. Oh my gosh. You know,
I gotta put you on the spot.
Chat GPT is going to be a game changer, and all the
Yes.
associated AI brothers and sisters of code in that farm, right?
Mm,
So
yeah.
before Christmas break, I didn't even know that existed, right? So I've been deep down the rabbit hole. As I'm trying to update my
Right.
lectures, I am just
Oh my gosh.
exploring and understanding that conversation. And up and down the curriculum, students are going to be reporting on that in those presentations, and they're going to have to apply it and help me understand.
That's
Because
right.
I tell you what, students can come with some perspectives that you would not even imagine, right? So there are faculty members right now who are afraid of ChatGPT and are afraid of,
Yeah.
Cactus AI and are afraid of Open AI and all those because of the opportunity for students to mismanage their educational assignments, right?
Yeah. Sure.
But
Yeah.
there are ways around
Yeah.
it. There are ways to check that activity. But the the just the depth of the leap that we just made is just unreal, unreal. So ChatGPT is definitely on the to-do list.
Okay. All right. We've
I
got a
am
contender.
actually in a quantum computing course with
Okay.
IBM,
Yep. Hmm.
and there's quantum healthcare right now, which is just so far out there. We couldn't even start to discuss it. But for me, it's just the love of that knowledge and finding out where the puck is going to be next and trying to meet that and trying to be in that place. Um, I feel like you know uh, this advanced learning health system is something we're not there yet. We're at the first steps of that, and ChatGPT is going to be a part of that, and our advanced clinical informatics, healthcare informatics teams that we're building, they're going to
Hmm.
be a part of that. Quantum's going to be a part of that. There's just a lot around the corner.
So there's a lot to absorb, is what I'm
Oh my
hearing,
gosh! Oh my
and
gosh!
and maybe there's some things within that we may have to unlearn to then
Yeah,
learn the next
yeah,
step. So
yeah.
I would love to have that conversation with you again at some point next year, and maybe even bring on Dr. Timothy Angst, who's also a professor or faculty member at or in Boston, who's also had some similar concerns and some questions around Chat GPT in particular. So yeah, we'll have to have that conversation next year. I think that sounds like a good continuation of where we're going, what the future of healthcare is from the pharmacist perspective, and how can we, you know, really drive the next generation of pharmacists forward. So
Drive is key. Drive is key. The key word is drive. You're absolutely right.
keyword is drive. I love it. You've been inspirational, Dr. Blash. Really appreciate your time. And if anything, if anyone has a question that's kind of watching or watching the recording afterwards, anyone has a question for you or wants to get in touch, where would they find you? LinkedIn?
Oh yeah. Anybody that wants to partner on a project, anybody that thinks that our team of students would be of value to the organization, anyone that wants to examine possibilities, anyone that wants that IV titration matrix,
That's
uh,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and I think that it's important for us to communicate with each other because
Yes. Absolutely.
I've been out of the marketplace for maybe seven years now. So I've been at Belmont maybe 7 8 years now. But thank goodness, the HIMSS organization helps me stay current with the pain points, and I think we understand what organizations are looking for. We try to put projects in front of the students that can help them help organizations overcome those challenges. Again, without
Yes.
an informatics pharmacist on the team, if you're putting together a HIT project, because the medication process touches all aspects of health information, or a hospital or a community, anything with health, right? So there's always going to be the medicine component. So if you're interested in having that conversation, LinkedIn is probably the place to get in contact with me. I appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation that you're having. I want to reserve a spot at the end of 2023 so we can have this conversation again, so we can look forward again. I'd
I
love
love it.
to talk to you again. I really appreciate this time we've had to talk about these things. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I love it. I think the more conversations we have are better because our voice is bigger as well. So let's bring in some of your students next year as well. I'd love to kind of maybe do some case studies around what they're up to, and until then, happy New Year, and we'll make it a good one.